Hello and welcome. Yeah. Yet another state on our 50 state Zen quilt block journey. As we go through this process, I'm having so much fun and I hope that you are too. So if it's your first week, welcome. If you've been here from the beginning, or if you're picking out all of your favorite states or states that mean something to you, wonderful. Thank you so much for being on this journey with me. Yeah. Here is a visual of all of the tools that we're going to be using this week, as well as a piece of acetate that I have off to the side for our blending purposes. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the tools. They were in the list at the beginning of the video. And I'm going to leave behind my tile, ruler, and pencil. So, of course, if you've been on this journey with me, you know that we're going to start with that 3/16 inch border along the outside edge of our block, bringing that cohesiveness, that similarity from each block to the next. This week we're headed into Oregon, the beaver state. Yeah. And of all the places that I've traveled, and all of the states that I've been to, I haven't been to all of them yet, but Oregon is the state that it took the most to leave. Loved it so very much. All right, so now that we have our 3/4 or 3/16 inch border all the way around, we're going to do a grid, 5/8. So each 5/8, we're going to add a little hash mark all the way across. And then we're going to take those hash marks and we're going to connect them to make columns or rows, depending on how you hold your block, right? So creating the string for the pattern of our quilt. And then once we have those channels or rows, we're going to go in between the space of those rows and we're going to add 5/8 again. So every 5/8, adding a hash mark. And then connecting those hash marks, which in turn will give us this kind of block grid that we're going to be working inside of. Okay, so we have these now 25 blocks to create or patches, I guess, to create our block. And starting at the top row, we're going to start in that second box from the left, and we're going to add a little dot or hash on the top line at 1/4 of an inch. So 1/4 of an inch along the top line in that second box. And then we're going to go to the second box from the right and add a little dot or a hash at 1/4 inch from the right side of that right block. So left side of the left block, 1/4 inch hash mark, right side of the right second block, 1/4 inch hash mark. And then we're going to go to that center box and put a little hash in the center of that box. So we're going to do 2.5. 5/16 is where we're headed for that. Okay. All right. So we're going to start right here and we're going to connect those hash marks or those dots from the left side and the right side. And now we're going to go to that second row. And in that second row, at the second block or box, we're going to divide that in half diagonally, corner to corner, top left to bottom right. And then we're going to go to the second box on the right, and we're going to go top right to bottom left to form that diagonal. So now we have this V in the top two rows of our quilt block, and we're going to go ahead, turn our tile, and we're going to do exactly the same thing on the opposite side. So second block or second box, we're going to add a little hash or dot 1/4 inch from the top left of the second box. And then we're going to go to the second box from the right and measure 1/4 inch from the top right of that box. And then we're going to go to that center box in that top row, and we're going to lay a dot or a hash mark halfway between, so 5/16. And then we're going to connect those dots. And then the second box in the second row, we're going to draw a diagonal from the top left to the bottom right, and from the bottom left to the top right in the second box from the right. Okay, so there we have it. We're all strung up for our Oregon state. So we're going to go to that kneaded eraser. We're going to warm that up, get it to activate, get all stretchy. And then we're just going to go ahead and tone those lines down. Just take some of that harshness away so that those lines don't interfere with the beauty of our tangling and representation of our state of Oregon. All right. So we're going to start with that light number 42 gray. And we're going to go to the center and the 4 outer squares. And well, Oregon has a special birthday. Oregon was born on Valentine's Day in 1859. So we're going to honor Valentine's Day in both this or the center and these 4 corners. So we're going to add some Valentine kiss into those spaces. So the first thing I'm going to do again with that light gray is divide that center box in half-ish. It's a tangle. We don't need our rulers. We're just going to divide that box in half. And once we have that box divided in half, we're going to add a C curve to the left side, and we're going to mirror that C curve to the right side, inevitably creating a heart. But we know that in Zentangle, there's no representation, so that's merely just a C curve that comes together in the center. And we're going to do that to the 4 corners as well. Taking your time, not worrying about the perfection of these hearts, just taking that C curve and mirroring it on the other side. So we're going to just let that Valentine kiss sit for the moment, and we'll address the next step outs to this tangle in just a bit. So we're going to go to, we'll start with our full boxes. So all of these full boxes right here, we'll just start right here on the top left, and we're going to add some crater for Crater Lake, the most beautiful, pristine lake I have ever seen in my life. So crystal blue. It looks like you threw dye into the water. You can see to the bottom as deep as it is. It's pretty incredible. If you've never seen it, it's definitely worth a visit. So, crater looks, we're going to start right here in this box and we're going to start vertically. So, crater starts with an arch to the center and then arches around to create almost a bulb in the center and then arches back down to the corner. And then I'm going to do the same thing and mirror on the other side. So I'm going to arch to the center-ish, create that bulge in the center, and then arch back out to the corner. Okay. So now that we have this crater completed, we're going to go to the second box and we're going to do the crater in the opposite direction. So here I started on the top line. So now I want to start on the side line. So to make it easier, I could just turn my tile and start once again on the top line, if that makes more sense to you. So turning your tile so that once again, we're on that top line and we're going to arch from the corner to the center, bulb in the center, and then arch to the corner. Mirroring that on both sides. So by default of turning that tile, we now have a vertical crater and a horizontal crater. You're going to continue to do this and flip-flop back and forth. So that means this would be a vertical. So vertical, horizontal, vertical. Again, here's our top line. I'm going to arch from the corner, arch in the center, and then arch to the bottom corner. And then you're going to mirror that on the other side. So you're almost getting this hourglass kind of visual happening here. All right. So if we're following this pattern, I know this block, this full block would be vertical because this is horizontal. So the next block would be vertical. So starting in that top corner, bulging in the center, and arching down to the bottom corner, mirroring on the other side. So we're going to ignore all of these half blocks for the moment, and we're going to go to this other side. So again, if we're mirroring, this is vertical. So this center, if we didn't have our Valentine kiss in there, would be horizontal. So this block would be back to vertical. And by default, turning our tile so that we have this line being our top, we'll end up with a horizontal crater into this spot. Okay. So this is horizontal. That means this is going to be vertical. Same thing with this box down here. Horizontal, that means this is vertical. Okay, so that takes care of all of our whole squares or patches on the outside of this X. All right, so we have a vertical here. The inside material or fabric of this V is also going to be crater. Okay, so the inside of the V is crater material. So we have to only do half of whatever crater is visible in this triangle. So just the top left portion of this triangle gets crater because it's inside of this V. All right. So because this is vertical, this is going to be horizontal. So again, only doing what you see in that space. And because this is horizontal, this space right above is going to be vertical. So because I don't have my left side, I'm just going to start on that right side, adding what I can see into that space. Again, this top triangle is horizontal, so this center is going to be vertical. So we have a full box here to work with. And again, horizontal. So this block again would be vertical. I know, it'll all make sense as we bring it together, I promise. And these two little sections right here on the inside of that V, all we're going to see is just that top arch of the horizontal. So all good on that side. So we're going to flip this over and do exactly the same thing. So here we have a vertical. This center would be horizontal. Here we go, adding a vertical in that full box right in the center. Horizontal in that triangular space between on both sides. And then the top, we're back to vertical. Doing what you can see. All right. So we have empty boxes on the outside of those V sections, or not boxes, triangles on the outside of those V sections. Well, in Oregon, I think the rule is it has to rain at least 10 minutes every day. So Brella is going to go into these open spaces. I know that right now this tile looks a little clustered. It's a little chaotic, but trust me, it's okay. It will all work out. Yeah. So Brella, um, usually in its truest step out, would take a full box and divide it in half, one side following the diagonal of the division, and the other side just being the stem or an aura indicating the handle of the umbrella. But because we only have half of that, we have choices. So we could take this whole triangle and add lines throughout the whole thing and just do a variation of our umbrella. Or we can divide it and still add a little bit of our handle. And that's what I'm going to choose to do. So I'm going to aura the string line. And then I'm going to continue to aura from that line I've just placed up to the peak of this triangle, like that. And then underneath, in the space that I've left, that's where I'm just going to go ahead and add the handle to the umbrella. Now, again, you can choose to fill that whole space with aura lines, and that would be just fine as well. You can choose to grab a completely different tangle, always having that option, right? Inspired by me, created by you. Just loving how each quilt block has its own story to tell, with each tangle somehow representing something about that state. Just loving the visual of how that's all coming together. Yeah. So take your time on that line work. Allow your shoulders to drop and that breath to be had. Wasn't much mindfulness in the first, or at least the second. That crater was a little bit detailed and needed to be kind of thought about a little bit more than these repetitious lines. Yeah. All right. So here we have these big portions. And again, this would be cut in half to show, or this whole box would be cut in half. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to use whatever I can see in the largest point. So just auraing from that division line up to the peak. And I'm using the side with the corner so that I can, in fact, separate and divide this block. And then underneath, adding that aurate handle. So doing the same thing on the other side. And this time I'm going to choose to So we're going to do the same thing to the other side, going from top right to bottom left, dividing that space, and then thinly adding those aurate lines to the peak. So we have those small triangular spaces still left on the top and bottom right in that block that we just did. And I'm just going to go ahead and add auras into that space. Just fill those space with lines. Remembering that all of this fabric is cut by hand, right? And we get to choose what portion of our design we want to show when we cut. So there we have it. I promise this will all come together once we add the final steps to the tangles that we've chosen. And we're going to do that with our color. So we're all inked up for the moment. We're going to head to our color. So we need our acetate and whatever medium you're using. And I'm going to start with my 528. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to start with my 985 just because it's the lightest color that we have in here. And I don't want to have any blending happening across the borders with the blue and the green. And this week, I'm going to do something a bit different in that I'm going to go direct to my tile. The state colors of Oregon are navy blue, gold, and green. So we're going to honor those colors this week and go direct. So it's a bit bolder than what we're used to. So I'm just going to go ahead and go direct to those brella sections. And then once I have that outlined, I'm going to go ahead and grab my blender and kind of pull that into the center. So I have that shading already happening around the edge of my tangle. And I'm just going to circular motion with that blender and pull it on into the inside. I want that real beautiful bright gold for those state colors. So I'm just going to pull that into the center and allow that to just rest as it is. I'm going to do that in each brella section, outlining the triangle and then circular motion with that blender, softening those harsh lines, pulling that ink or that color into the center of that fabric. And at no point when you're using this blender should your paper be pilling. If it's pilling, you need a new blender or you need to ease up on that pressure. I'm not pushing on this blender at all, merely just allowing it to float on top of that ink and pull it into the space as it works its way around, right? So try not to add that pressure for that pilling effect. These tiles are beautiful for this technique. And notice I know that all three of these spaces are getting the same color and the same technique, but I'm outlining them individually, which gives each one of those patches or each one of those fabric cuts an individual appearance because it's not, those three sections coming together are not one piece of fabric. They're three individually cut pieces of fabric that we're honoring as such. So just taking the time to outline each one of those sections individually. and allowing that blending or that texture of your color to happen. We want, again, those light, transparent spaces as much as we want those more opaque, darker sections of our coloring. That's going to help us create some life into this paper quilting, right? It's going to look more fabric-y, more real, more textured. Taking your time, remember these individual pieces are cut, so our fabric ends at our cut lines. It doesn't melt over beyond those string lines, right? Just take your time, enjoy the process. I'm not sure. I think I don't know, 22 or 23 states in at this point. And each one so uniquely different in colors, in patterns, in tangles. Oh, loving where this is going. All right. So I'm going to head to that green, that 126. And in each one of our Valentine kisses, that's where I'm going to head with my green. But we're going to honor the step out that would have occurred if we were doing this, in our ink the first time. So this is the first couple parts of the step out. What happens next is every other section is going to get inked in. So if we had our pen in our hand, we would have white, black, white, black going across that block. But instead of coloring that in and inking that in with our gray, I want to go directly with my green into those spaces. So once again, I'm going to go for the moment white, green, and I'm going to ink in the whole thing direct. So I'm just going to ink that whole thing in. I'm not taking my blender. I'm inking the whole section in. So white, green, white, green. So now the whole outside of this section is going to get direct green. Again, I'm not blending this. I'm going direct with my marker. Whatever medium you have is perfect. Again, I'm not minding any texture that happens in here. So that's the look I'm going for my Valentine kiss. I'm going to do exactly the same thing in each one of those boxes. Dropping those shoulders down away from your ears. Just enjoying the process. Offer yourself a breath. Take your time. So there we have our Valentine kiss to celebrate the birthday of Oregon. Yeah. And now I'm headed to our 528. 528, same kind of concept is happening with our crater. If we were doing crater in its original form or step out, either the crater would be inked in or the exterior of the crater would be inked in. Okay, so we're going to take that 528 and once again directly go to the background of that crater and ink in that background. Just so you know, I'm not completely done with the Valentine kiss, but I'm letting that portion of the ink dry a bit before we go to the next stage. And we're going to do exactly the same thing with this technique as well. So we're just going to let this background dry. We'll go back to our Valentine kiss and then come back to our crater. And then you'll know the reason why we're going direct or why I've chosen to go direct, right? Doesn't mean that that's what you're doing on your side. Um, but I wanted a variation in the material. I didn't want to ink with my gray. So I thought that if I inked directly, I would have the contrast of that real robust color with our more muted color, which is where we're headed after this. As always, if there's ever a moment that I ask you to do something that just doesn't speak to you, by all means, you do you, right? I just noticed that I missed those small little triangles underneath my umbrella on this side. So I'm going to go back to my gray and just add those in so I can add the ink. As I'm sitting here concentrating on what I'm doing, I just realized that the tombos have a thin side to their markers as well. It might have helped in the process. So it does have a beautiful point on its brush though, but if you're struggling to keep control of that brush and keeping it fine in these smaller spaces, you may want to flip your marker if you're using tombos. So now that that's all inked up, I'm going to go back to my 126 and I'm going to lay a palette onto my acetate this time. So now I want a more subtle coloring. And so I'm going to pick that color up with my blender and go to the white portion of my Valentine Kiss. So we have that contrast of light and dark, eliminating that white, and still being able to visually see that two-tone that's happening inside of that square. Now just be careful of that blue that we've just laid down for our crater so that you're not dragging that blue into that green space. Awesome. And we're going to do exactly the same concept with our 528, going back into those craters Adding a palette to our acetate, making sure that our blender's clean from our green, and then going into that white space. And adding that light blue. Even with the blender, this blue could get away from you rather quickly. So as you pick it up, you may just want to kind of wipe some of it off before you get to your quilt, because you can always add more. More difficult, of course, to take away. So notice I'm not being real particular about staying within the lines. Um, But know that as you cross those lines, you are bringing more of that blue palette in. All right. So there we have our fabric created. Ooh. Yeah. We've cut our fabric, we've laid it out, and now we need to sew it all together. So we're going to take each one of these patches. No, before we do that, we need to do our border. I have a hang up with these borders. I'm not quite sure why, but anyway, we need to do our border. So I think this week I'm going to be doing my border in yellow and green, and I think I'm going to do green along the long section and yellow into the corners. You could do whatever speaks to you. And I'm going direct, as with every other week with this technique, just so that, again, my borders are a solid, more vibrant fabric within the same palette that we've used in our block. Uniformity, bringing these pieces all together. And although they're all so uniquely different, They all marry with this very border. Then I'm going to pick up that tile. I'm going to ink those white deckled edges so that as the blocks come together, we don't see them side by side against our other tiles. Blending that side in, because this is fabric that's edging our block, right? Not paper. We don't want that white edge to have a voice at all. So there we have it, our inked up paper Oregon State quilt. All of these pieces or patches are laying on our table, all cut and ready to go. We've organized them in the pattern that we want. Now we need to sew them together. So I'm taking that dark gray, that 44, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch every single one of those patches, every single one of those blocks and rectangles coming together to really officially make this a Zen quilt, right? Otherwise, it's just a Zia. So just deliberately, intentionally, slowly stitching one staccato line at a time. Watching our quilt block come together with this detail. Remembering that those spaces at the top in the center, those are 3 different patches to this quilt. So be sure to sew them individually. Trying to avoid those sloppy tails from our pen. Picturing that thread going up and down through the layers of material, one stitch at a time. Drop those shoulders down away from your ears. Offer yourself a breath and enjoy the process. This week it's a pretty bright and bold pattern and color scheme, and the way we did those tangles really almost makes it a whimsical state quilt block. But nonetheless, I'm really loving where this is taking us. So don't forget your stitching along your border as well. I almost see a little, maybe Alice in Wonderland vision happening here with the hearts and the craters uh, being so open and bold, liking liking the visual of this. So we have the Beaver State with a birthday on Valentine's Day, representation of Crater Lake, which is absolutely magnificent, and honoring or noticing the daily rainfall with Brella. So we have our colored pencils ready for our shading. Now, a little bit iffy since we outlined these Brella sections, if it's even going to be visual, but I'm going to take that 1003 and just emphasize, go over that stitching and kind of add some depth right along that stitching line. Yeah, when you think you don't see it, pull your block away, change that perspective. Definitely is toning down or adding some depth right around that sewn edge that isn't visible to the ones we haven't done, right? So just when you think, why am I doing what I'm doing? You can't really see it anyway. Changing that perspective helps us see that it does, in fact, have an impact and you can see it. Nice. And then I'm going to go to that 1005. And of course, same thing, just along those stitched edges of each one of those Valentine kiss blocks. Of course, you're going to see it more prominently in the lighter side of that block, but we're wanting to enhance that pucker, bring that gathering of our material underneath that needle together to form the depth on the side, the shadow on the side, and that highlight right into the center. And then I'm going to take that 133, that cobalt blue, and lightly go around the edges of those cobalt or of that crater section. Adding that depth and dimension all the way around, although really only visible on the open ends of those craters. It's okay. Our mind's eye always knows how to finish the vision of what it can't see. I'm using this cobalt blue, super light circular motions. So, this could definitely have a tendency to get away from us rather quickly. Change that perspective if you've missed any. They'll jump right out at you. Just be mindful of any of those blocks that you may have missed in the process. When you think you're done, make sure you are done. There we have it. Or again, change that perspective, hold it out at arm's length. Ooh, ah. Offer yourself your signature, your chop, anything that indicates that this masterpiece is yours. And offer yourself gratitude and appreciation for allowing yourself this opportunity to create for yourself. And remember how I said about changing perspective? Right here is one that I've missed. So I'm just going to go back on in and then offer myself gratitude and appreciation. Much thanks to all of you for joining me on this journey. Until next time.